All right, so here we go again. Some more fun with painting. Today I'm doing some experimentation, and I don't know what's going to happen. I haven't done this before, so you're going to see it when I see it. I have 4 drops of midnight blue acrylic paint. That's water-based paint, and today I'm going to try mixing that paint with 4 different things. So over here, I've got walnut oil. This is water, which what's meant to be, right, with the paint. Tung oil, and then the last ingredient will be over here. I haven't put it down yet because it absorbs so quickly, or it evaporates so quickly, and that's going to be isopropyl alcohol. So that'll be interesting to see what happens. And I have 4 different blocks of wood here. We'll do a little painting and see what the end result looks like, and 4 different paintbrushes as well. First, we'll mix up this blue paint with walnut oil just to see what happens. Generally, oil and water are not meant to mix, right? And you can see it's having a very difficult time trying to mix with that walnut oil. The pigment seems to be kind of more clumping than what would generally happen with water. You can see it's thick, right? So let's go ahead and paint on the walnut oil block. See how that goes on. It does tend to be streaking, and it looks uneven to me at this point. So there's our first test. Yeah, definitely got a darker area up there. All right, we'll let that dry and see how that looks at the end. I'm going to put that brush away. Up next, we're going to use some water. And as I mentioned earlier, this is basically what you would generally use with acrylic paint, right? You can see it mixes very quickly and easily, as you would expect. And many of you have a lot of experience with using acrylic and water. And when we paint that on, it goes on pretty smoothly. As it is meant to. And generally speaking, it's not streaky. It also has a more even coating on there, right? So there we go, there's our water. Next up, we have tung oil. And we'll see how that works out. This looks similar to the walnut oil result, maybe a little different. Tung oil by itself, I will say, compared to walnut oil, tung oil has more viscosity to it, right? It's a kind of a thicker oil. So this does look a little different than the walnut oil. At any rate, we'll paint some on here and see how that looks. I still see that there are some streaks kind of with this paint. Let's see what happens if we dip into that paint again and get some more here. It does tend to, I will say, tends to mix better with the tung oil than the walnut oil from my first observation just right here. And it looks like it's less streaky and has a more even application than what we saw with the walnut oil. Interesting. We'll let that dry. Okay, so now we're going to get some rubbing alcohol. Now, this one is a 70% isopropyl rubbing alcohol, right? So it is diluted. It's It's not straight up alcohol. Trying to get some onto my little piece of glass here can be a challenge. So I'm going to dip my paintbrush into the alcohol and grab some. Grab a little more. Now what's interesting, on the market you can find what they call alcohol paints or alcohol pigments or whatever, and they're made for mixing with alcohol. Let's just see what happens with acrylic. Interesting. Wow. Okay. We can see here that the acrylic paint and the rubbing alcohol have a hard time mixing. It's really clumping. Look at that. Very interesting. Yeah, that is what you call a mess. So, all right, well, let's try and paint with it. Let's just see what happens. Yeah, very heavy streaks and clumps. That is what you call suboptimal. However, I want to try something in addition to that. Let's say we put a little alcohol onto the wood itself, and then we paint onto the wood, and we'll see how that turns out. I'm going to grab the brush that I used for my water earlier, dip that in here. I don't want to use that brush I just used for the experiment with the mixing with the alcohol, because that would contaminate our science. All right, so we have added some alcohol to the surface of the wood, and next we'll grab some paint. Let's go ahead and get some unsullied paint. Put a drop on here. But at any rate, we'll grab some paint. This has not been diluted with water. So that's interesting, yeah. So the alcohol soaks in very quickly, you know, as it tends to do, right? It dries and soaks in quickly. All right, so there we go. That other side's just a mess, yeah. I'm gonna let this dry, and then we'll come back to it and take a look and see what they look like. All right, so here we go. I've given the paint some time to dry, and we can just get our final thoughts on what we think about the experiment and how it turns out. So, in review, this is paint that was mixed with walnut oil. You can see it has the streaks in it, uneven sort of coating. This is paint with water, right? That's our control, all right? The paint with water as meant to be. This is interesting. This is the paint mixed with tung oil, and you can see the difference. The walnut oil and the tung oil worked better, I think. Might be worth some further experimentation. And then over here, this is what you get when you mix that paint with isopropyl alcohol. And then on the back side, this is what happens if you coat the surface of the wood with the alcohol and then paint on that. So there you go, a little bit of fun. Tell me in the comments, what about other types of things? Have you mixed acrylic paint with other elements? How did it turn out? Are you curious? What would you do? Thanks, folks. We'll see you next time.